Welcome to Sew with Monty. Today we're going to use our serger and make pin tucks. Now to make a pin tuck, it's very similar to a rolled hem. The biggest difference is we've taken out the inside needle and left the outside needle in. So you've removed the right needle and left the left needle in. This makes it a little bit wider than the regular rolled hem, and it makes a beautiful pin tuck. We've also set the dials on the side here. The differential feet is on neutral or 1, and the length of my stitch, on the knit, I'm going to use a little bit looser than a rolled hem, and I'll show you why just here in a minute. And then I've got my width down to R for the rolled hem. Now you can use any of these because the wider it will show if you set it wider. Most important thing I want to do is take my blade and turn it into the release position so that the knife won't cut the fabric. So let's turn back around and let me adjust the machine so you can see the stitching. So now we're going to start with the knit. Now I've intentionally left the knit more open, and I'm going to show you both ways and why. When you put your fabric in, you can see the knife right here. I like to butt my fabric up against the knife and use it as a guide. It's not going to cut any fabric off, but if I push too much fabric in there and the machine has to roll the fabric, it causes it to twist and it doesn't look quite as attractive. So I just use the knife as a guide, and I put my fabric up against it and then just lower my presser foot, have my fabric close to the needle, and then go very slow. So let's do one and I'll show you what it looks like. So as you can see, it's quite attractive on the knit, and I've intentionally left it spaced out because I'm going to sew one very close so that you can see the difference in what it looks like. I prefer this on my knit, and the woolly nylon makes it really soft and very supple. So let's do one more, and we're going to close the stitch up to the rolled hem length position, and I want to show you the difference. So now you can see the difference. This is with a closer stitch. This is with a rolled hem setting for the stitch length versus just maybe like a 1 or 2 over here. And I find that it's a little bit overwhelming on this knit, a little bit heavy. I prefer this one better, and I think if it were matching thread or a specialty thread, it would be even prettier. But I like the looser of these two. So you can kind of play around and see what you like and how you might want to approach your stitches. Now, in the next part of this, I want to show you what this looks like on a woven. So now I have a woven fabric, and I've done the same thing. I've marked lines on the back, and then I've pressed the lines so that I have pre-creased where I want my pin tucks. Now in this case, I'm going to go ahead and leave it on the rolled hem length setting, and I'm going to use my knife as a guide. Remember, the knife isn't really cutting, but it's there to help me guide my fabric through there. I don't want to push so much fabric in there that the machine has to roll it over and then it gets very gooey and twisted. So knife is out of the way, but it's being used as a guide to place the fold of my fabric against. Now this is a woven, so let's do a few of these and see how it looks. So as you can tell, the woven can take the heavier or closer rolled hem setting for stitch length a lot nicer than the knit does. Because the knit gives and stretches, it has a tendency to not hold its shape as uniformly as the woven does. So you can do all 3 of these, and then when you finish, you want to press them and you have some lovely pin tucks. So let me go ahead and sew them and press them, and I'll show you the finished result. So now we have our pin tucks finished, and as you can see, I've adjusted a little bit more on some of my tensions, but how nice the woolly nylon works, especially on the woven. And I can close my stitch up a lot tighter on the woven than I can the knit. But the knit is still very pretty and very charming with the stitch spaced out slightly. So this is a pin tuck, so try it, see how you like it. I think you'll really love it and the effect that it makes. So let's move on to some other stitches now. The next stitch I want to show you is a blind hem. And this is a really nice stitch, especially for knits or wovens for that matter. Thicker fabrics, it's just great all around to make a blind hem. What I've done is I've pressed under 1.5 inches hemline. You want it at least 1.5 inches because you're going to be cutting some of this off. You don't need to finish the edge because the serger is going to do it for you as it makes a blind hem. And then I flip it back so that I have about 3/8 to 1/2 inch left over on this outside raw edge, and another fold is created here. Now we're going to use what's called the multi-purpose foot, and every machine will have a different version of this, but it is nice to have. The beauty of this foot is that it has a guide that's adjustable by this little wheel, and you can spin the wheel looser and it pushes the guide away from the edge of the metal part of the foot, or you can adjust it back closer. I'm using mine against this foot because that's the setting that gives me the prettiest blind hem. And I'm using my needle, the outside needle only, not both needles. And then the setting for the tension is a little bit unique. You want the needle tension on 1. You want it loose because that's what's going to form your blind stitch. And then for my loopers, I've got my upper looper set a little bit tighter at 6 and my lower looper at 3. So somewhere in that range should do your stitch properly for your blind hem. Now on the other side, I've got the widest width, which is 7. You can go anywhere from 5 to 7 on your width. And I've got my needle in the cut position because I want to cut off any raw edge here that I need. And I've got my length on the longest length possible, which is 4. So longest length, I've got my widest width. Again, you can go anywhere from 5 to 7 on that. And you want your needle, your blade engaged for cutting. And I've got my differential on 1. Now if you see it starts to stretch or act unusual, you can adjust your differential to make your fabric behave the way you want it. So all we're going to do is put the fabric in here, aligning the fold up with the edge of our multi-purpose foot gauge. So this little white gauge here, the fold's going to just rest right against there. And then we're just going to sew straight through here. Now I've sewn, keeping the fold right along the edge of my multi-purpose foot, this little white guide right there. My guide has been adjusted so that the needle just catches the fold. And this is what it looks like before it's pressed or open. Now when we open it up, as you can see, it makes tiny little stitches here. And if this had been white thread on white fabric, you would barely see it. Makes a very nice hem, and then on the inside it's finished the edge off so that you don't have to worry about the edge raveling. So that's a blind hem on your machine using your multi-stitch foot. The next foot I'd like to show you is a gathering foot, and we've in previous videos showed you how to gather just using your differential feet, which is nice. It makes a moderate amount of gathering or ruffling or ease depending on what you're looking for. But if you really want your gathering enhanced, use your gathering foot. Now your gathering foot has a metal plate on the bottom here. It looks kind of like a sled run. So you put your fabric underneath everything, underneath both of these plates. And the spring in this lower metal plate kind of compresses the fabric and causes the gathering to be enhanced. So I'm going to show you first what it looks like just on a single layer. My setting is the longest stitch length. I've got my needle one needle in on the left-hand side. You can use both needles. You can use either needle on either side. So it doesn't really matter depending on your application. All of these things will cause gathering. So I've got my single needle in on the left side. I've got my tension set all across the way at 4. And all I'm going to do is sew across this raw edge and show you how it gathers. My setting over here, I've got it on the widest width. That too can be adjusted anywhere from 5 to 7. And my length, I've got it on the longest length. And my differential feed is on 2, the highest gathering possible. So you just gently hold your fabric. Don't pull on it or you'll distort your gathering. And just let it happen. So as you can tell, my gathering is a lot more concentrated using the gathering foot than not using it and just using the differential feed. So the next part of this, I want to show you how to attach fabric and gather at the same time. So the next part of this gathering, I'm going to show you how to add fabric to this layer of gathered fabric and end up sewing the seam as you gather. So we're going to put the lower part in here underneath the plate, the metal plate, all the way up to next to the needles. I'm going to put it so it's going to cut off just a little bit here, about 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to take my top piece of fabric like this, and I'm going to run it in between the upper part of the foot and the metal blade. So I'm just going to lift up the presser foot and put this little piece of fabric right in here. Now, just be gentle when you thread it through. It might take a little bit of time. And then once I have both of these in here, I'm just going to gently hold them to keep them in the guides. And I'm going to sew along like this. I don't want to pull on either one of them. I just want to be very gentle. And then just guide them along so that they stay inside the foot. And then as you go, it's going to gather the underneath piece and attach it to the upper piece all at the same time. So let's finish it off here and I'll show you what it looks like. Again, you can use both your needles. You can use either needle, right or left, to perform this. But see what happens when you're done? It makes a seam and it gathers the fabric underneath to fit the fabric on top. Isn't that lovely? And it's quite easy to use. And see, and here you have your seam and your finished edge as well. So the next part of this video, I'm going to show you how to set elastic with your serger machine. And I have 2 different types of elastic here. I have a 3/8 inch knitted elastic, which is made especially for swimwear. And I also have an 1.25 inch wide waistband elastic for pajamas, so it's quite flexible. We'll start with the 3/8 inch elastic, and in this case I'm going to show you how to use your multi-purpose foot to set your elastic, and this will help keep you from cutting your elastic when you use your serger. You're going to need your knife blades up. You want to loosen the tension on your upper and lower looper slightly. I've got mine set on 3, and I've got my needle, my single needle, the left-hand needle, on 4. Now, you can use both needles in this operation, or you can put your needle on the right or left side if you use a single needle. The main thing you want to do is keep your stitch length at the longest possible. I've got mine set at 4, and I've got my width about 5. I don't want too big a bite in my elastic, but 5 is pretty healthy. The first thing I'm going to do is feed both my fabric and my elastic in here, and you see I've got a little snip there. I want about 1/8 of an inch of the fabric to be on the outside edge so that it can be trimmed off, and I want my elastic to butt up against my multi-purpose foot guide right here. I've opened it up slightly so that the needle will be catching the elastic. I don't want it set as close as I do for my blind hem. The first thing you want to do when you're sewing your elastic on is to let it get purchased. So you're going to sew in there and lock the stitch just like this, and then once your elastic is held by your machine, then you can put a little bit of tension. Now if you don't want a lot of stretch and you just want the elastic to just lay there, you just want to take your finger and just pull it slightly, just a little bit, and that'll keep the elastic from stretching. I also like to hold the chain on the back just to get started a little bit. And then once it's sewing, I can let go of the chain, and then if I want more tension on my elastic, I can pull it even more. I try to work in the increment of the edge of the foot to the edge of the machine. So if it's relaxed at this point and I want a little bit more tension, I'll come up about a 1/2 inch and pull the elastic a little bit tighter. Now don't stretch it on the back, but you definitely need to hold it on the back just to give it some guidance. You don't need to stretch back here, but you definitely need some guidance from back there, especially if you're putting tension on the elastic in the front. So just go along like this. You can use your foot to guide you. Now, as you get better, you may or may not need your multi-purpose foot to guide you. This is just here to start with so that you don't cut into your elastic. But see, as you can tell, it sets the elastic on the fabric. I put a little bit of tension on it so it's got some gathering. You can do as much or as little of this as you want with your hand. If you have the foot that has the binding foot, it has a little dial on the top and you can tighten it or loosen it accordingly to cause this to pucker or relax. Now let's go on, and I want to show you how to set your waistband elastic. I love this method because it can be done on the serger and then tacked by hand or with your lock stitch machine, and it creates a beautiful waistband. So now I have a sample of fabric, and I'm going to create a waistband elastic on here. And the first thing I want to do is take the right side of my knit, and I'm going to take my elastic and I'm going to just place it on the top side here. Now I'm going to release this foot because I want to use my regular foot, and it's quite easy to release your foot. Every machine's slightly different, but mine has a quick release on it, and I just slip my regular foot up in there, drop my presser foot, and then there's a little lever in the back that clicks and locks. I'm back to my regular foot, and it takes practice. You want to try to practice this till you don't cut your elastic. You try not to dive into your elastic. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it right along the edge here. I don't want to really cut anything off, so you could do this with the blade down just to practice a little bit. And I'm not going to put a lot of tension on this elastic. All I want to do is just put the least amount of tension. I've got it on the longest stitch length, which is 4. I've lightened up my 2 lower and upper looper to 3. I'm using the outside left needle. Now you could use 2 needles here, it doesn't matter. But I'm using my outside left needle. And I'm barely putting any tension. Now, if you don't put any at all on this, sometimes it'll cause this to roller coaster. You can also set your differential feed just slightly above 1, and that will help too to control your elastic. But you want a little bit of tension on it, just barely, like this. And if this was a fitted knit pant, like a yoga pant or leggings, this makes a beautiful finish. And then once you get your elastic set, if you were going around the entire waist, you would overlap it 1 inch. Now, you take it like this, and you fold it under and press it. And then at the seams, you can tack it down just a little bit here, or stitch in the ditch. And this is the inside of your elastic, and this is the outside. So it looks very nice, like a nice hidden waistband for your pant. The last part of setting elastic, I wanted to show you what I've done in this top, which is really nice. If you're wanting like a little puff sleeve and you want to set the elastic, all I've done is folded and pressed my elastic, or my top where I want my elastic to be, and then I've set my elastic by stretching it. I've measured the cuff size I want my elastic to be, and then I just stretched and sewed along the fold of my fabric, and then overlapped it at the end 1 inch, just kept sewing across it, and it ends up making a little gathered cuff on my t-shirt. And it's just that simple. I've even used it here at the empire line to make elastic here. This is sewn on the fold. See, a little bit larger piece of elastic, 1/2 inch. But I've just stretched the elastic, pinned it. See, I've marked and pinned it where the waistline is, like halfway. And I then stretched my elastic in sections, from section to section, sewed it on, and relaxed it. And this causes a nice little gathered elastic waistline. So that's just another application for setting your elastic.